The FBI is now looking into as many as 20 or more other people who may have corresponded with this assassin beforehand.
If y'all want to get the update on the two men that was caught hanged, you can go over to the Anton Daniels channel. I recently dropped a recent video on that, and you can deep dive into it.
There may have been foreknowledge of the shooting. If there are co-conspirators here, what kind of threat level are we talking about?
Well, we don't know, Jesse, and that's why I've been so proud of Cash and the way that he's handled this investigation, because he's cast as wide a net as humanly possible. And the FBI really is looking at everything. By the way, there's a lot of weird stuff out there. For example, the CEO of Discord, or one of the leaders of Discord, said that there were no Discord chats that involved this guy. Now we know that there were Discord chats that involved this guy. So we need to look at everything. We need to leave no stone unturned. My own attitude to this, and people will send me stuff, Jesse, you know, from the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. Some of it sounds pretty crazy, but I'll send it to Cash and I'll talk to my team, because I want us to leave no stone unturned. It's the only way to honor Charlie, is to get to the bottom of exactly how this person was radicalized and who else was involved in it. Now, we could find out that this person was radicalized and it was terrible and there were a lot of very evil people in his life, but they didn't have foreknowledge.
Right.
We may find out that there were many, many people who were involved in helping this guy pull off the shooting. We just have to get to the bottom of it. That's what justice demands. That's what being a good friend to Charlie demands.
The militant transgender movement, is that a domestic terrorist threat?
If you are encouraging
Let me ask that question again.
movement,
that's what being a good friend to Charlie demands.
the militant transgender movement, is that a domestic terrorist threat?
If you are encouraging people to commit acts of violence against the United States government or against your fellow Americans, absolutely, you're involved in a terrorist movement. I don't know enough about that particular organization, but what you increasingly see, Jesse, is you see people in the trans community and other members of the far left who are saying they are so threatened by negative rhetoric that they must take arms and attack people. If your movement is telling you to commit acts of violence against people for speaking words that you don't like, number one, you're evil. And number two, you are engaged in a terrorist movement.
And I'm very glad that J.D. Vance is calling it exactly how he called it. We didn't see Kamala Harris at all until it was time for her to go to Ghana and advocate for alphabet community involvement in African countries. And when we heard all of her staffers were complaining about the fact that they didn't like to work with her, we didn't see Kamala Harris at all during the Biden administration. For some reason, she was just hiding out, hanging out in the White House. Maybe she was in a rose garden. I don't know. But J.D. Vance is probably the most visible vice president that I've ever seen in my entire life, in my lifetime. And he's 100% right. Any movement that is advocating for somebody to take somebody's life or to commit violence against other people because of something that they said is an evil movement. You are an evil person. You're not advocating for people to defend themselves. You're advocating for violence to be taken against other people. And off of what? Because you don't like what they said? So what?
And that's part of what we have to root out in the White House. And this is
Malachi says Mike Pence wasn't any better. That's a fact. That's a fact. I didn't even know what Mike Pence sounded like for a long time.
It's very important, Jesse. I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've talked to, Stephen Miller probably 7 times in the past 2 days. We are working very hard to ensure that the funding networks for left-wing violence, that the radicalization networks for left-wing violence, that if you encourage or fund your fellow Americans or anybody else to commit acts of violence because you disagree with political speech, you are going to be treated like a terrorist organization, and we're going to go after you.
Because
And I'm going to say this also. I think that goes for the right also, because there's some real extreme right-wing nuts that I absolutely disagree with. And they think that just because they vote Republican or that they label themselves conservatives, extreme right conservatives, that's not even conservatives, but extremely right people that spew hatred and say that they are going to do something to somebody because they don't necessarily like the way that they live their lives or they don't like the way that they say something. Those people should be targeted also. However, what we have seen recently over the last month or 2 months is that there has been a radicalization on the left side because they don't have any power and the American people voted the way that they vote. So when you talk about the shooter that was over in Minneapolis, when you talk about the shooter that shot Charlie Kirk, those people all, for whatever reason, they are all either in a relationship with a trans person or they are trans themselves. Real talk. I don't believe in that on either side. I don't support it. I don't believe on it on either side. I don't think that people should be looking to do violence against other people based off of how they feel. That is crazy to me.
Joe Biden said white supremacy was the biggest domestic terror threat.
Which, of course, is absurd. The statistics don't bear that out. But if you look at what the Biden administration did against the phantom threat of white supremacy, we actually need to take some of the lessons and say, if there is funding sources that is going for this stuff, if you're an NGO and you're actually funding riots and other kinds of political violence, why wouldn't we go after that? Why wouldn't we cut off those funding sources? And why wouldn't we prosecute people who engage in violence? It's interesting, Jesse. The people who are saying this is Gestapo stuff, they're calling us Nazis for saying that if you're funding or supporting left-wing violence, you ought to pay consequences for it. It really makes you think that the left has not done any of the soul searching it has to do to actually deal with political violence in this country.
Jasmine Crockett says, yeah, she calls people Hitler, but it doesn't mean she's responsible for any violence that happens.
Well, I'd ask Jasmine Crockett, what is it that you want people to do when you call them Nazis? What is it that you want them to do when you call them fascists? What is the proper response?
I would say that Jasmine Crockett incited a lot of people going to jail, if you're asking me my personal opinion. It's a lot of these politicians that's actually responsible for you being a booty goon now. For you being a pillow biter. Remember those Tesla incidents where they were burning up Tesla dealerships or whatever? Remember the rhetoric that was being spewed by politicians? Guess what? They not even going to try to advocate to get you out of jail. They not trying to help you. They not trying to talk to the governor to pardon you. They not pulling those strings for you. A lot of y'all just got arrested. You were charged with domestic terrorism. And now the world can't hear you because you're screaming inside of the prison yard. That's just, listen, y'all better be careful because now we don't know nothing about you. We don't even remember your name. You're gone. You're gone. And they just continue on with their own political career and just running it up and using you. It's just the facts.
When you
at least Trump is on a pardon and they don't give him any visibility at it whatsoever. Any visibility about it whatsoever. I should release that interview that I did when Charleston White was here and we had somebody else here and we did an interview about him and he had just recently got released by Trump because the pardons are actually suggested he's a black guy and he was facing football numbers. And he recently got released by Trump and he was talking about all of the good work that he was able to do now and how he's been able to be successful as a result of it. He has pardoned so many, gave clemency and pardons to so many black people. And y'all sit there and talk the worst about him. Y'all talk the worst about him.
say that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Charlie Kirk are threatening your safety, what do you expect people to do? This rhetoric is completely out of control, and it's part of this entire network of violence that exists on the far left. You dehumanize your political opponents. You fund paid activists to go and harass them and terrorize them. We've had a White House senior staffer just in the past week who has had actual representatives of the Democratic Party going around passing leaflets trying to get his neighbors to harass him and showing people where he lives, where his wife lives, where his young family lives. If that's not political violence, if that's not political harassment, I don't know what the term means.
Barack Obama says your White House is dividing the country and you're exploiting Kirk's death to attack Democrats.
We're not exploiting Charlie Kirk's death to do anything except for achieve justice. And I think if Barack Obama, I haven't seen that comment, Jesse, but if he said that, that's absolutely disgusting. What we're trying to do is understand how young people are getting radicalized and who is funding all of these efforts at radicalization. We saw this in the summer of 2020. Now, thank God that wasn't primarily, actually, over 20 people died in the riots in the summer of 2020. That is political terrorism, but it's not just the people.
Even in here, right? Because, you know, I like to interact with the chat and I like to go back and forth with the chat and I like to highlight some of y'all comments and address it or whatever. Even in here, have y'all noticed that the people with the most extreme things to say, they have no profile picture? Or if they have a profile picture, it's of somebody that's not them. Have y'all noticed that? Like, the left is weird, bro. They are some weirdos. At least when somebody disagrees with me on the right, but on the right or even sometimes when they just reasonable and they just look at things objectively, they always have a regular profile picture of themselves or a regular name. Always. Every time that I see somebody that says something crazy, they always hiding. Always hiding. That's a pillow biter. That's what pillow biters do.
People who are killing the cops. It's not just the people who are engaging and throwing the Molotov cocktails and in the riots. Where was the money coming from? Who was organizing this violent activity?
Every time.
That is not going after Democrats unless, by implication, you're saying every single Democrat is involved in planning political violence. If that's true, then the problem isn't on Barack Obama's side. We're going to get to the bottom of the truth, and we're going to stop the political violence. And we're going to do it however we have to do it, of course, within the constitutional limits that Charlie loves so much.
Joe Biden's FBI investigated Turning Point, investigated Charlie Kirk.
I found out a couple of days ago, Jesse, that Joe Biden's FBI investigated a dear friend of mine who's a political consultant. They were sicking law enforcement after their political opponents every single day. It's an open secret at this point. We're talking about having law enforcement go after the people who engage in and fund literal violence, and they're saying somehow that's beyond the pale, even though we know Joe Biden's FBI was investigating Charlie Kirk. Maybe they should have been investigating the networks.
Did they really investigate Charlie Kirk? Did Joe Biden's FBI investigate Charlie Kirk? Did Joe Biden even know? Did Joe Biden know about this?
That motivated, inspired, and maybe even funded Charlie Kirk's murder. If they had, Charlie Kirk might be alive today.
I'm glad we have transparency. We need transparency on this trial. Do you support putting cameras in the courtroom so we can see this assassin face justice?
You know, I've never thought of that, Jesse, but sure, I support transparency in all ways. I think having the trial, recorded, having it on TV, that strikes me as a good idea. But the most important thing I think that we can do as a government, aside from recording and actually televising the trial, is we just have to be honest with people about what we're finding. And we're really trying to do that. Look, investigations are complicated and difficult. There's a fog of war where a lot of information comes in. We're trying to screen it. I've told this to Cash. I've told this to our Department of Justice. The most important thing that we can do is just be honest about what we're finding, how we're finding it, when we're finding it, because I think that transparency is going to give people the faith that we're doing this the right way.
Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I know.
Shout out to JD Vance. He said he's going to go after extremists and anybody, because we don't want to see nobody else die. That's really what it comes down to. We don't want to see anybody else pass away because of how you feel and whether or not you see things differently. People are willing to crash out. And for me, that is a crisis. For me, that's a crisis. That is something that is worthy of being addressed.